When I told Dad I'd bought my first house, he just laughed like it was the punchline to some inside joke. Bet it's a tiny little dump, he scoffed with that smug grin he always wore. I didn't say a word, I just grinned and handed him a slip of paper with the address. The moment he looked at it, his jaw hit the floor. I knew right then this was going to play out exactly like I imagined. See, growing up, if my dad had a favorite pastime, it was tearing me down. Anytime I achieved something, he'd find a way to make it seem small. And if I failed? Oh, he made sure to remind me he saw it coming from a mile away. No matter what I did, it never seemed good enough for him. So when I finally shared that I'd bought my own place, I wasn't holding out for a pat on the back or some proud fatherly speech. I didn't expect anything except his usual smirk and sarcastic jab. And right on cue, he leaned back in his chair, let out a chuckle, and said, "Let me guess, some crummy little shack? Maybe something falling apart in the middle of nowhere," he added, shaking his head. I didn't take the bait. No defense, no back and forth. I just smiled, pulled out an envelope from my coat pocket, and slid it across the table. He raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" "An invitation," I said. "Housewarming party. Next Saturday." He snorted and flicked the envelope aside like it was junk mail. "Yeah, sure. I'll come," he muttered, already rolling his eyes. "Might as well see what kind of disaster you've gotten yourself into this time." I didn't stop smiling. Because this time, things were different. This time, I wasn't the one who was going to walk away feeling humiliated. No, this time, the look on his face was going to be priceless. I could feel it. The week leading up to the party felt like I was floating through a dream. My entire life had been spent trying to win the approval of a man who never thought I was worth much. But now, I wasn't chasing his praise. I was about to hand him a reality check. A long overdue one. This wasn't just a get-together with a few drinks and snacks. This housewarming was going to be a full-blown statement. My new place wasn't just a home, it was the home. We're talking a massive, multi-million-dollar estate tucked inside one of the most high-end neighborhoods the city had to offer. The kind of place my dad always talked about wanting, but could never afford. And I had done it without a single ounce of help from him. I sent out the invites, family, some old friends, a few important folks from work. I made sure every detail was taken care of, professional caterers, a live band, valet parking at the gate. The whole 9 yards. If he thought I'd settle for some broken-down shack, he was about to be stunned into silence. But right as everything was falling into place, something unexpected happened. The phone calls started. The first was from my mom. Now, she was never openly cruel like Dad was. Now, Mom was never outright cruel like Dad, but she never stood up for me either. She was always just there, quiet in the background, letting him tear me down piece by piece. "Hey, sweetie," she said in that sugary tone she used whenever she was fishing for something. "Your father mentioned you bought a house. That's wonderful. Where is it?" she asked, her voice laced with that fake sweetness. I could already hear the judgment lurking underneath. She wasn't asking out of genuine interest. No, she was poking around for flaws to pick at. "I sent you an invitation," I replied flatly. "You'll see soon enough." There was a pause on her end. Then a soft, nervous chuckle. "You know your father's only teasing, right?" she said, like that made it okay. "He just wants what's best for you." Right. Because constantly tearing down your kid's self-worth is the gold standard of loving parenting. "We'll see next Saturday," I said, cutting the call short before she could spin more excuses. Then, 2 days before the big day, the phone rang again. This time, it was Dad. Now that was rare. He only ever called when he had something biting to say. "What's the deal with this address?" he asked, his voice sharp and suspicious. "You sure this isn't some kind of mistake?" "No mistake," I said calmly. "That's my house." Silence. Then a short, scoffing laugh came through the line. "Yeah, okay. You actually expect me to believe that?" "I don't expect anything," I said, grinning to myself. "Just show up." I could hear it. Doubt was starting to creep into his voice, that little tremor of uncertainty. The idea that I might have done something huge, something beyond his reach, was starting to shake the ground beneath his feet. And that was just the beginning. When the day finally came, everything was locked in. The driveway to my estate, yeah, an actual mansion, was lined with high-end luxury cars. The same kind of cars my dad used to circle in magazines, pointing at them like they were dreams too far-fetched for a guy like me. That's what success really looks like, he used to say. Not that nonsense you're into. Valets in sharp uniforms greeted each guest, collecting keys with professional ease. Inside, caterers floated through the massive entryway with silver trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres, gliding beneath golden chandeliers casting a warm, elegant glow. Soft jazz trickled through the air. Everything, from the lighting to the polished marble floors, whispered wealth. Command. Accomplishment. Then I saw him. My father stepped out of his aging sedan, squinting around like he'd taken a wrong turn. My mother trailed behind, clutching her purse like she didn't belong there. He stared up at the house, his jaw tightening with every passing second. This was not what he had pictured. Not even close. I stepped out onto the front steps, taking my time, soaking in every inch of the moment. I wanted to witness the exact second his reality cracked. "Dad," I said, cool and casual. "Welcome to my home." He blinked, lips parting like he was about to speak, but nothing came out. For the first time in my life, my father had no words. I led them inside, where guests were already mingling, people he recognized, people he used to talk about with admiration. A well-known businessman shook my hand with a grin. An investment mogul I'd partnered with clapped me on the back. Dad knew those faces. He used to talk about them like they were gods walking among men. Now they were shaking my hand. "Come on in," I said with a smooth gesture. "Make yourselves at home." He followed stiffly, eyes darting from the soaring ceilings to the modern art on the walls to the wide staircase curling up to the second floor. My mom clung to his arm like she needed something solid to hold onto. Then, like it had been rehearsed, one of my staff members walked up. "Sir," the man said respectfully, "may I take your coat?" Dad turned to him like he'd just seen a ghost. "Staff." I had staff. He hesitated for a second, then slowly handed over his coat, his fingers slightly trembling. Still not a word from him. I had imagined this moment so many times. Dreamed of it. All the years of being brushed off, laughed at, made to feel small, this was the payoff. And I wasn't even close to finished. "Let's grab a drink," I said, guiding them toward the lounge. I poured myself a glass of good whiskey, then gestured for him to sit. He eased down into the leather chair like his legs barely had strength. I sat across from him, swirling the drink in my hand before taking a slow sip. Then I leaned in, my eyes locked on his. "You always said I'd never amount to anything," I said quietly. "You laughed at me. Mocked me. Treated me like I was worthless." His jaw twitched. His fingers clenched around the armrests. "But look around, Dad." I waved a hand around the room, pointing out the elegance, the power, the people who mattered. "I built all of this. Without you. In spite of you." He sucked in a breath through his nose, the way he always did when he was trying not to blow up. But still, he said nothing. For once, he didn't have a comeback. I let the silence grow between us. I savored it. This was the man who never let a quiet moment pass without filling it with sarcasm or critique. But now? He sat there stiffly, gripping the chair like it was the only thing holding him up. I took another sip. "Something wrong, Dad?" I asked, tilting my head slightly. "Not quite what you were expecting?" He swallowed. He cleared his throat. "This isn't yours." I smirked, already knowing where this was headed. "Oh? He trailed off, shaking his head like he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. "You didn't pull this off on your own." There it was, the final card. His last-ditch effort to reclaim control over the narrative. The idea that I, the kid he spent years mocking, had actually built this life without him, it was more than his ego could handle. I leaned back in my chair, resting my glass on the table beside me. "You can tell yourself whatever you need to," I said, my voice calm. "But the proof is all around you. I made this life. You had zero part in it." His face darkened, but just before he could throw something back at me, my mother finally spoke up. She looked around, her voice barely above a whisper. "We didn't know you were doing so well." I raised an eyebrow. "No. You didn't. Because you never bothered to ask." She flinched, shrinking into herself. My father's jaw tightened, still clinging to the last scrap of pride he had left, even though the truth was burning a hole right in front of him. And that's when I leaned in, lowering my voice just enough to make it sting. I looked my father dead in the eyes and said, "I invited you here for one reason." My voice was calm, but it had that edge, like steel just starting to heat up.
So you could see exactly what you'll never be a part of.
His eyes went wide. Like maybe he thought I'd brought him here to make peace or show off a little and then patch things up.
Nah.
This is my life now, I told him, and then I gave him that cold little smile, the kind I'd seen him give me 1,000 times.
And you? You're nothing to me.
His hands balled into fists, his face turned beet red, and I could see the insult coming a mile away.
You ungrateful little.
I raised my hand, cutting him off with one smooth motion.
Ah, I said, not angry, just done. Then I turned my hand just slightly and gave a small wave. Right on cue, 2 of my security guys stepped forward.
Tall, built, dressed sharp. They didn't say a word, just stood there behind him like the presence alone said it all.
My father blinked, stunned.
He opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, but nothing came out. "You're done here," I said.
And I meant it. Escort him out. Make sure he never sets foot on my property again. My mother gasped. Wait.
"No," I said, firm this time. I put up with his garbage for too long.
The disrespect. The way he made me feel like nothing.
I looked my father straight in the eyes as the guards moved in.
Not anymore.
He looked back and forth between them and me, his breathing heavy, his face flickering between rage and something else.
Something smaller. Like defeat. But he didn't fight it.
He stood up slowly, brushed down his jacket, and gave me one last look. Then he walked out.
And just like that, it was over.
I let out a breath I hadn't even realized I'd been holding. For the first time in my life, I had the power. I wasn't that kid anymore, desperate for approval or afraid of his judgment.
He was just a bad memory now. One that couldn't touch me again.
The doors shut quietly behind them. A few guests looked over, curious, but polite enough not to ask. The music never even paused.
Glasses clinked, laughter carried on, and just like that, he was gone. I stood there for a moment, letting it all settle in.
For years, I carried that man's voice in my head like an anchor, dragging me down every time I tried to rise.
But now he was out. Out of my house. Out of my life. I turned back to the crowd and put on an easy smile. Raised my glass a little.
"Well," I said with a light chuckle, "now that the entertainment's over, let's enjoy the night." A few laughs rolled through the room.
Folks raised their drinks, and just like that, the celebration kept going.
But deep down, I knew this night wasn't just about showing off the house or throwing a fancy party.
It was about the win. And I'd won.
Later, I slipped away for a minute and stepped out onto the balcony.
I needed a breather.
The cool night air hit my face, crisp and clean, and I just stood there, looking out over the city. Lights stretched on for miles.
Life kept humming along.
Inside, the party buzzed on, people laughing, talking, basking in success.
But me?
I needed that quiet moment.
To just be. Because it didn't feel real. Not the house. Not the success. Not even the party.
What felt strangest was the silence, his silence.
That voice that used to live rent-free in my head, always tearing me down? Gone. For good. And sure, I felt relief. Satisfaction. Even a bit of peace.
But there was something else buried underneath all of that too, something heavier. Because the truth is, there was a time I wanted him to be proud.
Really proud. Not just impressed. Not just tolerant.
I wanted him to look at me and see worth. That dream had died a long time ago.
But tonight confirmed what I'd known for years, he never would. And that? That was his loss, not mine.
I took one last deep breath, exhaled slow, and let it go. All of it, the bitterness, the need for approval, the hope he might someday change. I was done chasing validation from a man who never deserved that kind of power in the first place. I straightened up, fixed my jacket, and took one last glance at the skyline. Then I walked back inside, where the warmth and laughter were waiting for me. Where respect was given, not begged for.
I had one. And now it was time to enjoy it.
As I stepped back into the party, I felt the whole atmosphere wrap around me like the night itself was giving me a pat on the back. Conversations flowed easy, drinks were still being passed around, and suddenly all these people who used to ignore me were eager to shake my hand.
This wasn't just a housewarming party. It was a message.
I moved through the room, nodding, smiling, chatting. Even those distant relatives who'd never given me the time of day were suddenly full of compliments.
Funny how success makes people remember your name. But I had someone specific in mind.
And I spotted him near the fireplace, Mr. Langford.
A legend in my field. The kind of man my father used to talk about like royalty.
The kind of man he would have given anything just to shake hands with.
Now, he was at my house. My party.
I walked over, and the second he saw me, his face lit up. "There's the man of the hour," he said, reaching out to shake my hand.
"This place is incredible."
"Appreciate that, Mr. Langford," I said, giving him a firm shake. "Call me Richard," he said with a chuckle.
"And listen, I've been hearing about your work. I like it. A lot."
Then he leaned in a bit, lowering his voice.
"Let's talk soon. I've got some opportunities that might interest you." Opportunities. Not the kind you chase. The kind that find you. The kind my dad used to dream about. And now,
they were knocking on my door. I glanced toward the entrance, just for a second remembering the way my father looked when he walked out earlier.
The disbelief. The shame. He'd spent his whole life telling me I wouldn't make it. That I wasn't enough. That I'd never become anything. But here I was. Not just proving him wrong, but thriving beyond anything he ever imagined.
I turned back to Richard, raised my glass, and said, "I'd love to talk.
Let's make it happen." He grinned wide. "Now that's what I like to hear." As we clinked glasses, something hit me.
All this time, I'd been chasing revenge.
Chasing that one perfect moment to prove my father wrong.
But somewhere along the way, I built a life so incredible, his opinion didn't matter anymore.
Not even a little.
And for the first time ever, I realized I didn't care what he thought.
I didn't need him. I never had. This future? It was mine.
And it was wide open. The party stretched on into the night, full of laughter, toasts, and genuine connections.
But deep in my gut, I knew this story wasn't over. Not yet. I knew it wasn't over. Not with my father.
And sure enough, right around midnight, just as the last of the guests were trickling out, my phone buzzed. I pulled it from my pocket, glanced at the screen. It was a message from my mother. "Your father isn't okay.
He hasn't said a word since we left. I've never seen him like this. Call me."
I stared at those words, jaw tight. That was his move, every single time. Whenever I stood my ground or refused to play along, he'd flip the script. Suddenly he's the victim. It wasn't that he was hurting because of what I said.
He just couldn't handle not being in control anymore.
Still, I hesitated. Somewhere deep down, that stubborn, wounded part of me, that part that used to ache for his approval, wondered if maybe this time was different.
Maybe this was finally the moment he'd own up to everything. Maybe he'd finally say he was wrong. So, against my better judgment, I called.
It rang once, twice, then my mother picked up, her voice tight with worry.
"Thank God. He needs to talk to you." A pause, some shuffling, and then I heard his voice. "You think you're better than me?"
I closed my eyes, let out a breath. Of course. That's all he had to say.
No apology. No accountability. Just the same old bitterness. I didn't give him another second. I pulled the phone away and hung up. That was it. I was done.
I wasn't giving him another inch of my peace. I slid the phone back in my pocket, walked over to the bar, and poured myself another drink. I took a slow sip and let my eyes scan the room, the home I built, every piece of it a reminder that I had made it.
And he? He didn't belong here. Not anymore. The call lasted maybe 15 seconds. But the weight of it? That lingered. Because those 15 seconds made something snap in me, in a good way.
All these years I'd carried his voice around like a burden. Every time I stumbled, every time I second-guessed myself, I could hear him in the back of my mind, telling me I'd never be enough, that I'd never make it. But standing there in the heart of the life I built on my own, it finally hit me. He was never the one who got to decide my worth. I had spent too much time trying to prove myself to a man who never wanted me to succeed. Not because I wasn't capable, but because if I made it without him, then everything he did to hold me down meant nothing. And his ego just couldn't take that. I set my phone down, flipped it face down, and let the silence wrap around me. I was done. Done with the noise.
Done with the guilt. Done chasing something he'd never give. A quiet knock at the door broke the moment.
I turned and saw Ryan, my best friend, standing there, glass in hand, a familiar look on his face.
"You good?" he asked. I let out a breath and smiled. A real one this time. "Yeah," I said. "I think I finally am."
He grinned and walked in, poured himself a drink. "Man, if I were you, I'd be feeling on top of the damn world right now."
I chuckled. "Oh, I do." He lifted his glass. "Here's to you. To proving every last one of them wrong."
We clinked glasses, and as I took a sip, I realized something.
This wasn't just about proving anybody wrong anymore. It was about finally letting them go. And that? That was the win that mattered. The party was over. The last of the guests had gone. The house was quiet now, except for the low crackle of the fireplace and the soft hum of the city beyond the windows.
I stood in the living room, taking it all in.
The success. The home.
The life I built, not because of him, but in spite of him.
And I felt lighter than I'd ever felt before.
Because deep down, I finally understood it was never really about him.
Not at all.
I walked slowly through the house, hand grazing the cool marble counters, eyes drifting over the artwork, the high ceilings, the life I had poured myself into.
Every inch of it told a story. My story. I didn't build this to get his approval.
I built it because the kid he called a failure deserved better.
Because the young man he dismissed kept pushing anyway.
And because the man I'd become had finally learned to stop giving a damn what he thought.
I picked up my phone one more time. One last unread message from my mother. I didn't even bother opening it.
I already knew what it would say: more guilt, more excuses, more noise.
I held my finger over the contact. Paused. Then blocked it. That was it. No more looking back. No more hoping for words that would never come.
I poured one last drink, walked out onto the balcony, and looked out over the city I had made my own.
This was my legacy. My future.
And for the first time, it belonged to me and me alone.
And honestly, that was all I ever needed.